what you're telling me is that I can't change the future. I'm telling you that you can change the future via an act of will, but that doesn't mean that the future cannot change. I think there is a distinction between determinism on one hand and what I would call fatalism on the other.
Hello and welcome to the All Quack No Quack podcast. My name is Paul and I'm sitting here with Callum.
Hello.
And today we have a very, very special guest. We've had him on before and we fucked up.
We did.
Yeah, really badly. But today we welcome Dara, the Magic Skeptic. Welcome to the channel,
Hello.
Dara.
It's a pleasure to be here for the second time. I think you might want to clarify what you mean by fucked up before people read a little bit too much into what that means. Yeah. They might think I was a diva or something.
So, I didn't set the recording software up correctly, so we have no audio from your side. So it was half of a conversation.
Yeah, it was an interview with Magic Skeptic without Magic Skeptic.
Yeah.
No, it's a pleasure to be back to have round two. I'm very, very happy to be here, and so I'm excited to dive right in.
Yeah, I mean, we really enjoyed the last conversation. I think we had a really good, sort of quite deep conversation at points. So we've been looking forward to this for a fair while.
Give it a second.
Me too.
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, just to kick it off. We ain't got a plan.
Yeah, no, we've made absolutely no plan.
But we never do for these episodes anymore. We just start chatting.
No, we used to like regiment, sit down, work out exactly what we were going to talk about, what we were going to do, and then we hit about 10 episodes, realised we had no ideas left, and just decided.
So we just sort of roll with whatever's going on.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
You was on there with Matt Dillahunty.
I was.
Yeah. How was that?
It was amazing. It was a dream. It was an absolute dream come true. I'm still pinching myself. I can't.
I've only seen bits of it because it was on quite late. But
yeah.
I haven't seen the whole thing yet, but I will.
Yeah, I've been on with him now. I want to twice. I've been on with Matt at this point. Once on the Hang Up and once on what's the other show called? I've forgotten the name. Anyway, it's all on the YouTube channel called The Line. So yeah, it was. I have to admit, it was a dream come true. You guys know from being long-term viewers of my channel that Matt Dillahunty is a huge influence of mine, as I'm sure he is for you guys.
Yeah.
And it was just absolutely humbling and amazing. And if you watch those episodes where I'm on with Matt, you can see me just like a little schoolboy pinching myself.
Yeah.
Because I got to sit there live with Matt Dillahunty as he was getting angry with certain callers and telling them to shut the F up and muting them and all the stuff that we have come to love about Matt Dillahunty. Some people give Matt a hard time, but what people forget is that Matt has been doing this a very, very long time. And when somebody calls in and says, well, if you're walking down a beach and you encounter a watch, and it's like, come on, I've heard this a thousand.
Yeah.
I've heard this 1,000 times. And so, to be fair to Matt, you gotta extend an olive branch. The man has been doing this a very, very long time, and so his patience wears thin every now and then. And for what it's worth, I find his tantrums hugely entertaining, as I'm sure you guys do.
Yeah.
And if you watch those episodes that I'm in, every time Matt has a meltdown and freaks out, I'm holding my mouth and muting my mic because I'm destroying the quality of the show because I'm literally keeling over in laughter. And it was just so amazing. And to be fair to Matt as well, he gave me plenty of screen time, mic time, whatever you want to call it, where I got to, shall we say, dissect the arguments of various callers. And let's forget, I was also on with Shannon Q, another legend in her own right, on this talk show. And Dave, I just recently, my most recent appearance on The Line was for the Recovering from Religion Foundation live stream. It was like a 9-10 hour live stream, and I got to appear on that with Aaron Raw and Professor Mike, and that was another dream come true. Big fan of you guys.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, everyone. The microphone just there's no way it didn't pick up that motor spike that went down the flat.
No. So I live in an attic space, So
we live in the real world. It's cool. You might hear traffic outside my window shortly as well. It is what it is. But anyway, to bring the story to a close, they invited me back just recently again for that.
Oh, fantastic.
For that charity live stream, and I got to appear with two other heroes of mine, Professor Dave. I think did I say Mike earlier? I think it's Professor Dave, and Aaron Raw. Aaron Raw is another huge influence of mine, and that was just absolutely amazing. So yeah. Anyway, I've probably rambled off and went down a rabbit hole there that I wasn't supposed to go down, but. Yeah, that's
great. Yeah,
that's just a brief kind of summary of things that have been happening lately on my end, and it's just been absolutely thrilling.
I mean, I think especially with what you're saying about Matt Dillahunty getting a bit of a hard time, I think he definitely does, because he's quite often answering the same question over and over again,
and they're stupid questions again.
Yeah, exactly. But when he does get a good question, when he goes deep down a line of reasoning. Like, if you sit there and follow along, you'll be on the edge of your seat.
Matt is a super intelligent guy. He's super intelligent. And yeah, when he gets one of those calls that requires some deep philosophical, dialectical skill, you see Matt at his best.
Yeah.
And he just, I mean, I've learned an immense amount from him. I consider him... albeit virtually, I consider him something of a mentor. Not that he would consider me his student. I'm just a guy who appeared on the show with him a couple of times. He doesn't know much of anything about me, presumably, but I definitely see him as a mentor from watching him all these years, and I've learned a great amount from him. And I was trying to explain the kind of privilege that it was to appear with him. I was speaking to a friend of mine who's into football, and I said, it would be like David Beckham inviting you to play football with him on the field.
Yeah.
That's what happened. I got to do skepticism with one of the greats of our time.
Yeah.
And I'm still pinching myself. And it's like this year has just been the best year ever for my channel. And I must be doing something right if I'm getting the rub shoulders with people like Aaron Raw. I got to appear. How did I not mention this? I was on Paul O'Gia's channel as well. I did a video with Paul O'Gia. We did a collaboration. Paul O'Gia, another hugely popular...
Oh, I think I've seen that as well, yeah.
Yeah, it's another hugely popular counter-apologist. And that was just an enormous treat as well. So I must admit, the American and or Canadian skeptic community has kind of welcomed me with open arms, and I don't know what I did to deserve such a warm welcome, but I'll bloody well take it. I mean, I'm just I'm humbled. I'm humbled and excited in equal measure, and so long may it last. I can't wait to have many more conversations with these people, and let's see what happens. Let's see where it goes.
I mean, to be fair, I think we're quite a lot the same with sitting down recording with you.
I was going to say that.
Yeah. Oh, stop. I see, this is what's really weird for me, because I still feel like I'm a nobody, and I am a nobody, and my channel, let's face it, is very small in the grand scheme of things. I'm coming up on 17,000 subscribers. Like, my channel is
coming
like,
up on 21 subscribers.
Yeah.
We were all there, folks. We were all there. And I guarantee you this, when you guys are at 17,000 subscribers or just approaching 17,000 subscribers, you'll feel exactly how I do. You'll feel like, I don't know, there's an old adage, and I think it's so true. Comparison is, comparison is the thief of joy. That's so true. And I feel like I'm robbing myself of joy, because I do this all the time. I say, oh yeah, I'm coming up in 17K, but like, look at this other channel over here that has 200K. Look at this channel over here that has 1 million subscribers. And really and truly, that is me robbing myself of joy by comparing my channel to others that are more successful. And I should just stop doing that. I guess I should just be very, very grateful. And I am, make no mistake, I'm incredibly grateful that I'm at 17,000, or just coming up in it at the very least, at the time of recording, that is. But what really just floors me, and what I really can't come to grips with, is the fact that you guys are excited about talking to me. That doesn't make sense in my mind at all. I just feel like, what? Like, I don't get it. I'm just some schmo. I'm just some guy who doesn't know how to shut up and records it every now and then.
But I mean, ultimately, you've worked for what you've got.
Absolutely,
You
yeah.
know? And
You can say that again. Say that again. I'll tell
Yeah.
you. The bags under
There's-
these eyes didn't get there on their own. I'll tell you that.
Natural.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's got to be an immense amount of pride in getting to where you've got. Just off the skin off your own back, really.
I'm going to give you such a philosopher's answer here, and I apologize in advance.
No,
But there's
on.
a really, really weird part of my mind that cannot accept the credit. And it's because I don't believe in free will.
Yeah.
Because I don't believe in free will, my thinking on it is I just so happen to have the kind of body that won't give up. And that's as much as I can say about it. I feel weird about giving myself a pat on the back, and somebody watching this now is going to intercut what I've just said now with my delight from earlier about appearing on the line with Matt Dillahunty. But look, free will is so baked into our zeitgeist, into our language games, that it's hard to speak without tacitly recognizing free will. But just if we're being charitable, and if the listener is being charitable, you'd have to forgive me for drifting into libertarian free will linguistic territory when our entire language game is built upon it. So with that acknowledged, I would still stand steadfastly by the point I just made, which is I don't think there's free will, so it's hard to take credit for it. If we go down the compatibilist road of defining free will as doing what one wants and that sort of thing, so like that old, I think it's Schopenhauer line where we can do what we want, but we can't will what we want. I'm sure I've heard that before. That is the kind of context in which I'll take credit for it. So along the compatibilist lines, this is the body that did the work, so this is the body that deserves the praise. But it's just important that we recognize that there's no free choice going on anywhere there. So it's weird. I feel conflicted about taking credit for it, but you're not wrong. It took an enormous amount of work, free or not, free will or not. It took an enormous amount of work, and the only way I've been able to manage it is by working unsociable hours. So I used to be a full-time teacher. I'm now a part-time teacher because of my modest success on YouTube thus far. But when I was still a full-time teacher, and even still now, I still work 4 out of 5 days a week. I have to edit in bed at the nighttime. I have to edit the weekends when I'm not working. I have to work around when I'm free, which means that I have to say no to certain outings. I have to say no to watching movies sometimes. I have to say no to my friends and having fun sometimes. If I want this dream to become a reality, I'm going to have to take a short-term hit for a long-term gain, delay gratification. And so, there's an immense amount of work involved. And for anybody who's willing to put in the work, the rewards are there. I think YouTube is a very approachable platform. And I think the only thing that separates the people who succeed from the people who fail is the hard work. Determined or not, free or not, the hard work is the ultimate arbiter, it seems to me. And so, it's definitely been hard won, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, well, just going back to the sort of the determinist area, just like I think determinism ultimately, it brings a lot of hope, but it also steals a lot of pride and joy, which is, I think it actually is a bit more of a fair exchange than people might give it credit for, because, for example, especially for me, if I feel like I'm in a hard time in life, I quite often remind myself that actually there isn't free will. I'm a product of my surroundings, so whatever will be will be.
Yep.
You know, I've just got to get on with it, and that can actually be a really handy tool.
I think I heard it on one of your videos at some stage, and I don't think it was you. I think you were parroting somebody else. I don't remember where it originally came from, but like I really like the idea though. It's like we have will, but it isn't free. Like the individual has free will, but the world around us is all deterministic. So we just make choices based off of what happens that we have no control of.
It's kind of that Schopenhauer line. It's you can do what you want, but you can't will what you want. So I very often use some basic examples to illustrate this to people. I'll say just choose not to want something you want.
Mm.
So you ask the person to conjure something in their mind that they want, and I'll invite all of your listeners to do that right now. Think about something that you want. Maybe it's something as simple as a delicious ice cream. Maybe it's something as profound as a lifelong partner or a career change or what have you. Just try for a moment not wanting it. Try to want the opposite. So, for example, I want a pizza right now. I would love a pizza. I would love to sink my teeth into a pizza. That would be amazing. If I try in my mind to will myself to want the opposite, to not want pizza, no matter how many times I say it, it doesn't become true. No matter how many times I say, I don't want pizza, I don't want pizza, I don't want pizza, I don't want pizza, I can repeat it ad nauseum, and it's not going to change the underlying psychological fact that I do, in fact, want pizza.
Yeah.
And that's everything you need to understand, as far as I can tell, about free will determinism and the gulf that exists between them. We cannot will what we want. We just want what we want. We do what we want, but because we don't have any will or any freedom over the will itself or over the wants themselves, there's no reason to think that there's any freedom there. I've explained that poorly because I'm thinking on the spot right now, but I hope you guys can be the judges.
No, we understand.
That doesn't sound like a muddle. And if the listener still isn't convinced, I think I would submit that they've just done the thought experiment incorrectly. We cannot change our wants. It doesn't work like that. You can't want something you don't want. Now, some people will say, oh, but I could still do the thing that I don't want, therefore I'm free. But you'd have to want to do the thing that you don't want to do in order to prove a point. Yeah. And that would be a want as well. And the fact that you want that is not a choice either. So there's no escaping this, right? There's no escaping it. And the only way that people have seemed to have come up with, it seems to me, in order to demonstrate the existence of free will, is to just concede that there isn't any and just rename it or redefine it. And that's what compatibilists do, as far as I can tell. They just redefine free will as doing what you want. And so they will acknowledge the compatibilist view. I mean, a compatibilist will agree that determinism is true. They'll just argue that it's compatible with free will, but they achieve this by redefining free will as doing what you want, which is a kind of a definitional sleight of hand, which never sat easy with me. As you can tell, I'm a critic of compatibilism. So anyway, I'm rambling once again, so I better shut up for a moment and let you guys respond.
Because you've given me a lot to think about, but you've given me a lot to relate to there. Because so recently I was only there for about 3 months in a distribution role, because obviously I'm a forklift driver, so that's I ended up working in a warehouse distributing books, and I actually found it extremely frustrating, because I'd walk around and 90% of the books are stuff like how to change your thinking, and I'd end up picking it up and going, well, you don't. Or like manifesting, and I feel stupid just picking up the book. Like, I feel like it's making me a little bit thick. But just every now and then one would crop up where it's like the one that always made me laugh is I'd pick like 3 of manifesting and how to change your thinking and all this other stuff that is completely fallacious. There's no real science behind it.
Just throw in a Stephen Fry.
All of a sudden I'm picking surrounded by idiots, and it's like I feel like the book's surrounded by idiots. If you think of the books as people, you know.
Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from. Some of those books can be definitely very low-hanging fruit. I will say one thing, though, just in case there's a misconception amongst the listeners. None of what I'm saying should be conflated with the idea that change is impossible. That's very frequently a misunderstanding that happens. People will say, oh, so what you're telling me is that I can't change the future. I'm telling you that you can change the future via an act of will, but that doesn't mean that the future cannot change. I think there is a distinction between determinism on one hand and what I would call fatalism on the other.
Yeah.
So the analogy I often use is, you're just a stone tumbling down the hill. That's what you are.
Yeah.
And the stone can change directions if it bumps off of another rock, or if it bumps off of a wall, or if it ricochets off of a pipe, or if it gets blown by the wind. The stone could go any one of a dozen or more directions. It's just that the stone will only do that because it's being acted on by other forces. The stone doesn't have its own will. And I submit that there's something very similar going on with human beings. You are the stone that's just tumbling through life. Some people's tumbles are more pleasant than others. But ultimately, your direction may go this way, may go that way. But the reason it'll go this way rather than that way won't be because you have free will. It'll be because something nudged you that way or something else nudged you the other way. So none of this should be conflated with fatalism, this idea that the future is set in a kind of
In stone.
Like in stone, exactly. Like there's a fate or destiny or a train track that we're all on. All I'm saying as a determinist, and perhaps there's determinists who would disagree with me, all I'm saying is that whatever change occurs in the future or now or 10 minutes from now, it will occur not as a consequence of your free will. It will occur as a consequence of causal factors acting upon you as a physical entity in a physical universe governed by physical laws that are deterministic in nature. And that's the end of it. And that can be very depressing for some people. But going back to your point, Paul, I couldn't agree more with your optimistic assessment. I have derived immense comfort and utility from my belief in determinism. When something goes terribly and I've made a complete mock-up of something, sure, I could be hard on myself sometimes, and I think that's evolutionary, and I think there's definitely utility in that. But every now and then I'll catch myself, and when I say I catch myself, I don't mean that I choose to catch myself before people try and catch me out there. What I mean is a thought occurs. From where it comes, I don't know. I'm assuming it's produced by my brain. I'm just pointing out that I don't believe that I willed it into existence, because such a thing is a contradiction. That would imply that I must be aware of the thought before it occurred, which makes no fucking sense. So the thought just manifests in consciousness, a thought which says, you're being too hard on yourself. Determinism is true. You're not the author of this failure. You are merely the proximal cause of this failure.
Yeah.
And that can make your feeling of regret diminish. Somewhat. Now, it also means on the flip side that, like what happened earlier, I can't take full credit, if any, for my success on YouTube, modest though it is. But that's a hit I'm willing to take. It's not a biggie. I derive immense comfort and utility from the truth of determinism. It just makes me feel better. I fully accept that others don't feel the same, and that's fair enough. Ironically, they can't choose but to feel how they feel about it.
Exactly, yeah.
The very same way I do. And so, such is life. We're all caught in these chains of causation, out of which there's no escape.
I mean, because the other thing you reminded me of was, so I've been meaning to tell Callum about this for a few days and keep forgetting, but I think it's something you'll find interesting as well, is that within the past 2 weeks, I've actually met someone who was in their 40s, and I had to explain to them what an atom was.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, that became quite a lengthy conversation, but I found it quite amusing and also a bit frustrating that there's someone out there of that age bracket that doesn't know what an atom is. I mean, if I met a 90-year-old that didn't know what an atom was, I'd be a bit understanding that science hadn't come as far, in their younger years as it has for us. But actually, what you were saying on determinism made me think, actually, if I thought about that in a deterministic manner, I'd feel more sorry for that person. Because
there you go.
Like,
so in 20 years, there'll be somebody talking to you about something you don't know what it is.
Exactly.
But the determinism would make me think, well, what sort of environment have they been in? It can't have been a massively positive environment they've been in to not have that basic bit of education that most of us would have by the end of primary school.
It's not their fault that their scientific literacy is so poor.
Yeah,
and this is the other.
Have to make allowances though, because sorry, Dar.
No,
go for
it.
Allowances because when you leave school, how much do you remember from your schooling, like what was actually said and what you actually learned at school?
Oh,
it's just not relevant
like
to your
60%
life.
of it's gone. Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah,
it's not relevant in your life anymore. So
yeah, no, you're spot on. Ultimately, nobody is responsible for anything, and this is the thing that people like Christians and people who believe in libertarian free will, they will engage in a kind of a boogeyman, like, ooh, when it comes to determinism. Oh, so you're telling me that criminals aren't responsible for their actions and that we should just open the prisons and let them all walk free because nobody is really to blame for anything. That's a complete straw man. But the first part is correct. Nobody is ultimately personally responsible in the sense that there is a free will that they exercised in the carrying out of whatever crime they committed. That part is true, but it doesn't follow from that therefore we open the prisons and let everybody walk free.
No.
We can still have the exact same, in fact, judicial system, only it's improved in the manner that Paul just inferred when he gave that person a little bit more compassion when he realized, hang on a minute, they're not to blame for not being aware of what an atom is. They are the sum total of their experiences and their environmental circumstances. The fact that they don't know what an atom is merely a feature of the chains of causation that they found themselves in, a chain of causation which did not include scientific literacy. Henceforth, they're oblivious. And so it's not their fault. And so instead of feeling a sense of revulsion or a sense of hostility or irritation with such a person, instead you feel exactly what Paul said, which is a feeling of sympathy, a feeling of compassion. And we can achieve that with criminals. And yes, even the worst criminals. Even the worst. Now, people will very quickly say, oh, so are you telling me, Magic Skeptic, if somebody murdered your whole family, that you'd feel compassion for them because they're not ultimately responsible? Of course I wouldn't feel that way. I'm personally involved. Rightly or wrongly, I would feel murderous feelings towards that person who hurt my loved ones. But that wouldn't mean that the philosophical point I'm making right now isn't true. Of course we can be emotionally compromised. There are atheists who will say a prayer in their final moments. That doesn't mean that the arguments for God are good. It just means that human beings are irrational. So that's not a gotcha. Sorry, folks. That doesn't work as a gotcha. Yes, we're imperfect, but that doesn't change the argumentation. It doesn't change the facts on the ground, not one jot. It doesn't change your epistemic warrant or whether or not you have one. So I think Paul raises a really, really great point here. Determinism can have utility in multiple ways, the ways we've already discussed, but it can also produce a more compassionate human being. Because when somebody becomes the thief that steals bread from Tesco, when somebody becomes the drug dealer dealing drugs in the corner, when somebody murders somebody or whatever they do, we can understand, hang on a minute, if we look through the causal factors that led to that, we discover a very obvious pattern. And criminologists are all over this kind of stuff. Lo and behold, the person who's dealing drugs on the street corner is very often a person who comes from a ghettoized area. They're very often the person who has a poor upbringing or bad parental figures or didn't get any guidance, or they come from extreme poverty and they're desperate and there's no opportunities in their society. They have been subject to discrimination, or you name it. There are causal factors that lead to this behavior. In other words, if you were able to go back in time and take that exact same baby and take them and give them a completely different context, loving family and all the rest of it, and you would see a completely different consequence, because causal determinism is the case. Because causal determinism is true. And again, people will say, oh, but I know a person who had a bad upbringing and they didn't end up a criminal. Well, yeah, because there's going to be genetic diversity, because this isn't a scientific experiment. Some people would say twins. Well, if determinism is true, why do two twins raised in the same family with the same parents and the same diet, why do they end up living different lives? Because there's so many factors at play that it's impossible to make their lives like for like. Are you telling me that their parents spoke in the exact same tone of voice every single time they were spoken to? Are you telling me that their dinners were exactly the same portion size with precisely measured ingredients down to the atom? Speaking of atoms, are you telling me that their teachers in school, they had the exact same teachers with the exact same level of competencies. Are you telling me that they walk the exact same path to school? I could keep going here. The idea that you have actually made their lives identical and so that there's no environmental variation is preposterous. Of course there's going to be environmental variation, and it's in those environmental variations that over the long periods of time, little changes add up over time. That's where you're going to tease out the differences in why those twins became different people ultimately. And by the way, last thing I'll say on that, twins aren't identical down to the atom. They might resemble one another in appearance.
But they're not. No, they are still.
But to suggest that their synaptic firings are happening at the exact same time, in the exact same ways, is just ludicrous. That's absolutely ludicrous. That doesn't bear out at all. And so, there's suffice to say, there's really, really good evidence for determinism in my view, and there's really, really good points in its favor, like the one Paul mentioned, which is that it can actually produce a more compassionate society, which has a better understanding of criminality and extends more compassion to criminality and more understanding to those, which in my view, I think leads to potentially, although I'm not an expert in this literature, I think understanding a problem more deeply, solving it. That's all I'll say.
I mean, building on what you were saying about sort of building a better prison system, when we look at Central Europe, at the Netherlands and Finland, how different their prison system is to ours, and it almost seems, especially to someone who's used to our very Western, almost outdated prison system that we use in this country, almost seems soft, but what they're actually doing is they're putting someone in a better environment. They're giving them the correct tools and the correct influences, and using education and educational and behavioural therapy methods in order to change that. That is in and of itself a form of determinism. They're changing their environment, which is ultimately going to influence the way someone acts in the long term.
Exactly.
Said,
and the critics
deserve to be thrown in the fucking hole.
And the critics of determinism will say, oh, but if determinism is true, why would you try and rehabilitate them? If determinism is true, they can't be changed. And again, no, that's not what determinism doesn't necessarily mean,
because
that
you're an outside force in their life.
Again, you're just, it's the stone tumbling down the hill. The criminal in this case is the stone, and when they ricochet off, say, I don't know, let's say as the stone is tumbling down the hill, it bumps into a fire hydrant and it goes to the left instead. The fire hydrant in this analogy is the corrective mechanisms that the criminal is going to be exposed to in prison. It could be the counseling, it could be the education, and those causal factors. The hope is that will change the person. But here's the thing. If they don't change, if they still become a vociferous criminal, and when we release them, they go back to their old tricks and they break all the laws again, we can still lock them up under a determinism framework, because even if determinism is true and this person isn't ultimately responsible for their actions that they seem helpless to prevent, we still have to lock them up just out of mere practicality, because we can't have someone walking around murdering, killing and stealing and so on. We can't have that as a functional society. So we lock them up, not because they're responsible, but because it's necessary to quarantine the problem. It's like what Sam Harris said. I think Sam Harris put it beautifully. If we could imprison hurricanes, we would. We would. We would lock them up. But we can't imprison hurricanes, so sorry, we're stuck with it. But what we can do is imprison Ted Bundy. What we can do is imprison who was the Jeffrey Dahmer. We can imprison these people. We can lock them up so they're quarantined and they're no longer a hazard to human beings outside of prison at the very least. So all of this is perfectly compatible with determinism. There's no reason we can't have a determinist framework. And as far as I can tell, we don't lose much and we actually gain a whole pile. We make our justice system better. It's more compassionate, more understanding. We don't, riddle ourselves with guilt and feelings of shoulda, coulda, woulda, because we understand that there is no free will. And so what happened just happened, and it is what it is. And to ruminate on it is kind of pointless. Draw a lesson from it if you can, if your brain is such that it can draw a lesson from it, and then just move on if you can.
I think I made this point to you before, but the prison system it is a perfect example of why I think why I think a lot of atheists in particular believe in necessary evil. And I think it should be an example that people should consider when they're thinking about whether there is the existence of necessary evil. And of course, definitionally, it depends how you're going to define evil. But if you look at a dangerous individual, a murderer, for example, to protect society at large, we need to separate them from society. Yep. Therefore, we put them in prison. That separation from society in and of itself is a punishment. It's not a nice thing to be doing to someone. Therefore, that's a necessary evil.
Yeah, indeed. And getting into evil, I mean, it just, like you quite rightly pointed out, Paul, it depends on definitions, obviously. For me, it's evil is just a label that we put on actions that are undesirable. But when you use the phrase necessary evil, what you're talking about is we have to do X because it's for the greater good.
Yeah.
And again, that's just a label that we're putting on a set of practices that we put in place for the greater good of society. So yes, using that definition and combining it with determinism, the necessary evil is that we quarantine certain individuals because we can't have them killing, stealing, or doing whatever with impunity. And I think that's a very, very fair system. And if people knew more about determinism and how it's compatible with the justice system in this way, I think they'd be more open to it. But because some preacher somewhere told them, or because some person who doesn't understand it very well told them that determinism is this spooky, scary thing where criminals are allowed to roam free and where nobody is responsible for anything and it's just complete chaos. Well, yeah, I'd be afraid of that too if that's what determinism was, but it isn't.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we were on that point into the ground, didn't we?
I was hoping I might have something to fucking follow up that.
Yeah.
But I don't.
Ironically, there's no free will and you're not in charge of what thought occurs next in your head.
No, exactly.
No.
It will either occur or it won't occur.
Yeah, we actually, I think we did an episode on determinism. Was it? No, it was existentialism. We did one on existentialism. And solipsism.
That would have been like one of the first few.
Yeah, but
yeah,
I made a short out of it, and it was the "it doesn't matter" counter. I think we came to about 32 or 40 times throughout the episode. One of us said, "Well, it doesn't matter."
Well, let's face it, nothing matters at the end of the day in the grand scheme of things. Some that might sound like a very dark statement to say, but I think nihilism is pretty. Nihilism is a pretty hard case to refute. We are brought into existence against our will because we don't have a will before we exist. We're born and we don't have a will, and then we eventually have one when we develop a theory of mind. So basically we're brought into existence because two other people decided to do X, Y, and Z. And then we live for a very short period of time on a planet that's hurling through space at ridiculous speeds in a vast, what appears to be purposeless universe. And then we will eventually be dead and gone forever. And there's no evidence for any afterlife or anything like that. We're here for the blink of an eye in the cosmic sense of time. And when we're here, we are confronted with the pitiless indifference of the universe. The idea that there's any more to it than that isn't obvious to me. And so, yeah, nothing really matters, objectively speaking. Things can matter subjectively. My fiance matters a great deal to me. But those are feelings that are in my mind. The idea that that's objective. It's objectively true that I have the feelings. Make no mistake. But the idea that the feelings themselves are objective is a kind of a swapping of the map for the place, it seems to me. It's kind of like my favorite color is baby blue. So that's a subjective preference. It doesn't follow, therefore, that it's objectively true that baby blue is the best color.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And I mean,
and so we do appear to live in a nihilistic, meaningless universe, and that's very sad for some people to consider. But I think truth is more important to me than being comforted. So.
Yeah, and I think a little bit of nihilism is actually quite healthy.
I think too much of it's very unhealthy.
Yeah.
Going down the rabbit hole.
But then this is where our conversation got really deep. Is when we started to consider nihilism versus solipsism, because ultimately, yes, a lot of nihilism is gonna lead you down a dark rabbit hole.
Yeah, no
but
shit.
it's, that there's really not a huge problem with nihilism until you meet solipsism. Once you start to become a bit more solipsist, then you've got an issue.
I'd be interested to know what you mean by that, because for me, I think nihilism can be pretty pernicious all on its own. I know people who are incredibly depressed, and I'm going to avoid certain words because I don't want to get your video demonetized. But let's just say that these people are very heavily considering deletion, right?
Yeah.
And the reason they are considering, no, it's funny to put it that way. I totally get it. The reason they are is because they feel like the universe is a purposeless void and that life is suffering, and what's the bloody point? And I don't know, it's hard to argue with that. Not with the deletion point. I definitely could argue against that, but it's hard to argue that the universe is a purposeless void. The only meaning that appears to exist is subjective. The idea there's any objective meaning beyond that, I think you're going to have a pretty hard case in your hands to demonstrate that such meaning exists. I've seen some attempts. People will appeal to the fact that, oh, well, if meaning isn't real, then, why is it so universal amongst human beings? Well, that's just an argumentum ad populum. You're just appealing to the popularity of something, to how widespread it is. And if you want to play that game, well, there was a point in history where a hell of a lot of people believed the earth was flat and they were wrong. A lot of people right now believe in God, and yet it doesn't follow that therefore God exists. A lot of people believe in witches and have done historically. Witches and belief in witches and witchcraft is basically a cultural universal, and yet it doesn't follow that witchcraft is true. So if you want to go down the road of suggesting that meaning exists objectively in the world because it's a widespread belief, well, I'm sorry, you're gonna have a difficult time separating the truth from bullshit if that's your epistemology. That's a garbage epistemology, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly been in the same place in terms of nihilism, where I've been, like you said, to the point of considering deletion. But I think, obviously, there is a degree to which nihilism can become unhealthy. But what I meant is when, with the point on solipsism, when you hit solipsism, there you've got an issue, is this almost the selfishness of solipsism. Because with solipsism, you can justify going and ending someone's life because nothing matters, so it doesn't matter if you do that.
I see what you mean. What you mean.
Has a ripple effect on the people that love that person.
Yeah, it fails to consider that ripple effect. It does, really.
Well, there are no ripple effects on other people if you're a solipsist, of course.
Well, yeah, exactly, yeah.
So the ripple effect argument wouldn't affect the solipsist, right? Yeah, it's an interesting one. I hadn't considered those two being linked together and how dangerous that might be. That's a fascinating point. You've definitely unlocked a door that's going to cause some rumination over the next few days. I felt it happen like an epiphany. But I will say, in defense of nihilism, if I could be so audacious, there is utility in nihilism as well. I'll give you one example that comes to mind, and I know this to be true because it happened in my own life. When I was a younger man, and before I met my fiance, when I was single and I was out in nightclubs and trying to chat up women and all the rest of it, whenever I felt the fear of approaching a woman, I would instantly have another thought occur. Dara, you're going to be dead in a very short space of time. Nothing matters, including this potential rejection. So why not? And that was always enough to kick my ass into gear and walk over and try my case. And that was it. And that's how I met my fiance.
Yeah.
I approached her on a dance floor. It's a little quick anecdote. It's a funny story, actually. We've been together 10 years now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. But she was standing at the edge of the dance floor, and there was a guy who was clearly trying to demonstrate that he was interested in her. He was like talking to her and trying to get her attention. And she clearly was having none of it. You could see the grimace in her face, and he was too drunk to realize that she wasn't interested. So I noticed this, and I walked over and I leaned in and I whispered in her ear and I said, if you pretend I'm your boyfriend, he'll fuck off. And she put her arm around me and said, "This is my boyfriend. Could you leave me alone, please?" And he got really, really angry and stormed off. And so we were left there then in this embrace as though we were girlfriend and boyfriend. And I said, so now that I have you by yourself, what's the story, basically? And one thing led to another, and here we are 10 years later. But I owe that story to nihilism. I owe that story to the fact that my view of the universe as a meaningless void means that failure and rejection doesn't matter either, because nothing matters. Now, one could just as easily respond and say, but Magic Skeptic, that means that you procuring your fiance didn't matter then either. Yeah, true, but it felt fucking good.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
because there's no objective meaning doesn't mean that pain and pleasure don't exist.
No.
In a universe where nothing matters, why not be happy? Right?
And that's what I mean by, like, when I said that I think a little bit of nihilism is healthy. And I mean, I'm going to call it this purely to sound smart, but
He isn't.
yeah, thanks.
It will just be the appearance of intelligence.
the YOLO hypothesis.
Yeah, indeed.
Which I think, you know, is for a lot of people, especially a lot of people who wouldn't really think about nihilism or even research it or anything like that. That's almost their own personal little way of coping with nihilism and understanding the positivity in it.
I got a point bouncing off of that. I don't think anyone who's intelligent has ever used the word YOLO before.
No.
I can't imagine Christopher Hitchens up on stage going, "Oh, YOLO, I might as well go up."
It's a point that I made in a video. I made a video responding to William Lane Craig's. For your listeners, in case they're not familiar, William Lane Craig is one of the most popular Christian apologists working today. But he frequently is quoted as saying that atheism is hopeless. And I made a video responding to that claim. And I basically, at risk of sounding unintelligent as well, I basically articulated that YOLO hypothesis in my video. You know, atheism isn't hopeless. If atheism is true, and if naturalism more broadly is true, which is to say all that exists is the natural world, the strong and weak nuclear forces, the periodic table of elements, magnetism, electromagnetism, and whatnot. Basically, the forces that we understand to exist in the natural world. If that's all there is, well, then there's no reason to suppose that we're going to survive death. Death is the end. You will return from whence you came. Oblivion, right? We will all return to oblivion. You will be dead forever, and you won't know about it.
No.
That sounds very dreary. But the YOLO hypothesis plays a role here, because if I know that my life is both short and singular, in other words, I'm not getting any other chances, game over is game over. There's no respawns, folks. A video game is actually a really good analogy. You know, when you play a side scroller or a video game that's life based, so like I'm going to date myself here, but I grew up playing Sonic and I grew up playing Mario and so on. When you ran out of lives, there were no checkpoints. You were dead and you were back to the start of the game, all the way back to the start. Didn't matter if you were 3 hours into the campaign, you were back to the start, buddy. And that was it, right? So when you were on your last life, what did you do? You played the game so much more carefully. You paid more attention to everything, and it was almost more fun because of it. You were less careless. You were more present in the moment. And I submit that the exact same thing is true for the atheist naturalist worldview. Because I am convinced that this is my one and only chance at existence, I try my best to live each day like it's my last. I try my best to savor every last bite of a delicious meal. I try to appreciate every last moment with my friends and my family and my fiance and so on. I try to enjoy conversations like this to the last second, because I could walk out in front of a bus tomorrow and then that's it. I'm gone. It's game over. So contrary to what certain Christian apologists might have you believe, contrary to what might be thought of or what might be a generally popular idea amongst the public, atheism is not hopeless. Atheism is not meaningless. In fact, naturalist atheism as a framework to live your life is incredibly enriching, because I don't have an afterlife to bank on, as far as I'm aware. I'm not going to get any respawns, as those who believe in reincarnation might assume. I've got one chance, one spin of the wheel, and so I have to make this count. People who believe they're getting an eternity after they kick the bucket, that renders this life but a waiting room. The people who believe in reincarnational models, I mean, they think they're going to, like Buddhists with the wheel of samsara going around again and again and again. Yeah. They think they're going to get multiple chances or spins of that wheel. I don't share their
optimism. They think they're on their first life at Mario.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they think they've got, 20 more lives ahead of them or something. I don't share their optimism because I don't see the evidence for it. If it turns out I'm wrong, fair enough. But I'm going to have to see evidence in order to believe that. Not some appeal to authority, not some appeal to an ancient mystical holy book, not some appeal to consensus. I'm going to need more than a fallacious argument. And, in the meantime, I'm going to live my life to the fullest because as far as I can tell, this is the only one I'm getting. And I don't understand why people don't see that. I don't understand why people don't see the utility of naturalist atheism. I don't get... I mean, don't get me wrong. I understand why it might be sad to think that once you're dead, you're gone forever and you won't see your loved ones again and so on. I get why people struggle with that. That's fair enough. But let's forget that atheism and naturalism have utility in the here and now. They give you a zest for life. Appreciate every last moment because you're getting one chance and one chance only. And don't get me wrong. I don't want to be in the business of giving unsolicited advice. I know it probably is irritating to some listeners to hear me waxing lyrical, telling them how to live their lives. I'm not telling you how to live your life. You live your best life. I'm just telling you that this stuff has helped my life enormously. Contrary to the popular stereotype of the depressed nihilistic atheist, I couldn't be happier. And my happiness went up. My contentment went up. My life became more fulfilling when I became an atheist and a naturalist. More fulfilling. Yeah, and if that can happen for me, it can happen for your listeners as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
I agree with that 100%.
And I think it removes the idea that atheists have, awe and wonder. We do. We still have that awe and that wonder. And I've heard it said, like, what do you have awe at if not a god? Well, I have awe at science. I think people have awe at science from a very young age. I mean, I can still remember my first chemistry lesson where you took baking soda and white vinegar and made a volcano, and you had all, oh my God, how does that happen? How does that work? And then you learn how it works. Like, oh, that's so cool. Yeah. And for those who still follow science into adult life, you look at quarks and muons, and you look at the fact that we've discovered this thing. We don't know what it does. We're still that, we're still there going, oh, that's cool, but what's it do? What's it for? We've still got that awe in science.
And you can get that awe in other places as well. History and anthropology and poetry and art. My fiance and I were talking yesterday about the pyramids, the Egyptian pyramids, and how, according to my understanding, and you guys can correct me if my information is out of date here, but apparently, and according to my understanding, we still don't know how they got the capstones on the pyramids. We have no idea how they did it. Apparently, some of our best technology in the world today, our best cranes, our best hydraulic lifts and stuff, wouldn't be able to accomplish this feat. And yet the Egyptians accomplished this thousands of years ago, which has led some Doe fans to suppose that literal aliens might have been involved, and other whole host of nonsensical, evidentially bankrupt nonsense. But the point is, I have awe at that. My jaw drops when I think about the mysteries of the ancient world and how they were able to accomplish things that we can't even do today. And despite our best efforts and our best evidences and our best explorations and investigations, we still don't know how the Egyptians did that, according to my understanding.
Yeah.
That's awe-inducing. How can you hear that and not feel a feeling of awe? That's so exciting. There's such relish in the mystery of that. I dare say, at risk of sounding like a moron here, I'd almost, not quite, but almost prefer that we never discover the answer. There's something about the mystery that I quite relish.
Yeah, no, I kind of get what you mean.
Enjoy.
It'd be nice to know the answer, but at the same time, it's like, oh.
No, like I said,
kind of fascinating because we don't know.
I prefaced it with almost. Ultimately, if the answer was available, I would prefer to hear it. But there's a part of me that's like, but this mystery is so scintillating. It's so exciting that I'd almost like to live with the mystery, you know? And again, I say all of this as a diehard skeptic, atheist, methodological naturalist, whatever label you want to put on me, arsehole. But like, yeah, this idea that atheists can't have wonder or that they can't feel awe or astonishment, I feel it on a daily basis. I felt it yesterday looking at the sun. It's fun. It's fun. It's fun. My fiance and I were in a real philosophical mood yesterday because we went out of the house yesterday evening to go get a takeaway, and when we were on our way into town, the sun was glistening in the sky and it was absolutely astonishingly beautiful. And I said to her, I said, you know, sometimes it makes sense to me why people look at the sun and come to the conclusion that there must be a designer for all of this, some kind of a god, because that's just so fucking beautiful. And she said, yeah, I know what you mean. And then there was like a 10-second pause. And then I said, but the skin cancer really kind of shakes me out.
Yeah.
You know, the skin cancer really, really shakes me out of that.
It drags that argument right back.
All you got to do is think about it 10 seconds longer and you realize, no, it's bullshit.
Yeah.
And then I ended up waxing lyrical. Yeah, what about the sunburn? What about the solar flares? And then she said, yeah, what about the fact that the sun is a gaseous ball that's going to burn out eventually, resulting in the death of every living thing on this planet, you know? Or yeah, exactly. Or what about the drought in many parts of the world that's been caused by too much heat, too much sun, right? You think about it just 10 seconds longer and you realize, yeah, this fuzzy feeling of beauty that I have in my chest, for whatever reason, it evolved.
Bring your missus onto the channel for you because she sounds great. Like she's really good at it.
She is. No, she has told me on multiple occasions, don't even dream of asking me, because she's very stage shy, camera shy, and so on. But yeah, we do have some great conversations, and yeah, it's just funny how quickly you fall back down to earth. It's not like I was becoming a theist in that moment looking at the sun, but sometimes you get a feeling in your inside and you're like, it's just an empathetic feeling, you know? You're like, you know, I get it why somebody could look at this sunset and think there must be a god. But, you know, skin cancer, sunburn, drought, solar flares, like the list goes on. It becomes pretty untenable as soon as you realize the rest of it. Certainly, you would have to at least concede, if you're a theist, if there is a god, he's a dick.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you look at, so you think about the fact that we're destroying this earth essentially, you know, with emissions and everything else.
Yeah.
And you think, so this incredible God that you're bigging up, that you say is so all-loving, he put us on a world so packed with natural resources that we can use to destroy it.
Yeah. Absolutely. But again, they've got all of their theological get-out-of-jail-free cards. Oh, but this is a fallen world. We were in a perfect world, but Adam and Eve screwed up, and so now we're in a fallen world. Or, you know, the different theodicies.
Well, if he's all-knowing, he would have known that they were going to fuck up.
Well, yeah, exactly. So none of these answers are particularly persuasive, unfortunately, not least because they require belief in a literal Adam and Eve and so on, which is, you know, preposterous. But the other theodicies, so like, I don't know, I think I've got this right. Yeah, John Hick argues that the world is, your existence is all about soul making. So he kind of goes down the road of the Arrhenius model of theodicy, where evil is a tool of God in the world. God, in other words, has set up this triathlon of bullshit, agony, pain, and misery. God has set up these burning hoops of fire for us to jump through so and that we might develop, to be tested in order to develop a soul that might be worthy of the kingdom of heaven. You see, well, that one thing I've realized from my years of studying philosophy and the arguments for God's existence and the theodicies and so on, there is nothing that could happen in the world that isn't reconcilable with theism. Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing could possibly happen that would be irreconcilable. It's just because making something reconcilable with something else is constrained only by one's creativity. And that's it. Yeah. Like literally the entire world, we could discover today the entire world is going to end tomorrow, and it's going to end in such a manner that we all boil to death. Every human.
Yeah.
Man, woman, and child, babies included. We're all going to boil to death. And furthermore, it's going to take about 6 hours for that boiling to result in the death of each individual. So we're all going to scream in agony for 6 hours until we expire. And there will be theists on the news tonight explaining how this is consistent with the Bible.
Yeah.
And they'll find passages that make it work.
Yeah.
You know?
It's funny because my mum's currently watching a show on Netflix. I think it's called Greenleaf, and she's an atheist too. And like we're watching it, and it's all about these mega churches. It's a bit of a drama, but we're loving watching it. And now I've completely lost my point.
Okay,
That's
well,
okay.
I had another point I was going to bounce off. As like, I just thought it might be interesting if we went round, not the whole room. If we went round
it'll come back to you, Paul.
Screen's room. Yeah, okay, it'll come back to you, and we'll swing back round in a minute. But how did the three of us individually all come to atheism? So, I don't know if you've told that story before, but it might just be interesting how everyone arrived.
Yeah. Should I start?
If you like, yeah, you're the guest. Go for it.
Yeah, sure. Just to put a neat bow around the previous point, and then I'll segue. One thought that occurs to me. Here's my prediction. Here's a prediction, and then I'll tell you the story. If, and this is a huge if, it's a very unlikely if we ever discover conclusive evidence of the multiverse, I guarantee you Christians will reinterpret the opening lines of Genesis as follows. Well, it did say God created the heavens with an S. And so clearly, heavens was a reference to the multiverse. Right? They'll forget about the 2,000 years of theology which insisted that God created life on one planet, and this is all for us, and it's about our special relationship with God, and so on. And if we discover life on another planet, they'll find another passage which sounds like a loose reference to another planet. There's no end to the creativity. But anyway, I digress. My story in terms of becoming an atheist is very, very simple, straightforward. I'll tell you the abridged version. So, I was raised Catholic. It wasn't a very strict Catholic upbringing. It was very moderate. I was radicalized in the online space. I was radicalized by people like Lee Strobel, William Lane Craig, and so on. Catholicism was the seedbed. My Catholic education was the seedbed. I was a very moderate Catholic. But I was radicalized in the online space by those Christian apologists. I'm ashamed to say that I used to think that these people were very, very persuasive. But I suppose they are. They're very charismatic, and that's their whole thing. So I was persuaded by those people, became a very, very anti-science Christian as a consequence. So I wasn't a young earth creationist, but I was an evolution-denying creationist. I thought evolution was folly. I used to utter atrocities like, well, show me a crocoduck. I used to say things like, well, if evolution is true, well then, when did monkeys give birth to humans? Like just utter, inane, ridiculous, monstrously stupid stuff. But anyway, when I was still in what Americans would call high school, what we in Ireland would call secondary school, towards the end of secondary school, I was about 17 years of age. I discovered the atheist experience. I discovered Matt Dillahunty. And I found him.
That came full circle in the end then.
Yeah. I told this story to Matt off air, and he was very touched by it. He was very, 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 very nice about it. So he was like my introduction, and I found him very, very charismatic, very, very persuasive. And he made some points that I couldn't instantaneously refute, which got my attention because for all my flaws, I was always very curious. If I didn't know how to respond to something, it would always encourage me to dig deeper. And so I did. I ended up reading books like The God Delusion. I encountered the works of Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, and all the rest of it, the new atheists as they were known, or as they have become known. The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, Daniel Dennett, may he rest in peace, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, may he rest in peace, and Richard Dawkins. And basically over a period of reflection, reading, study, from between the age of about 18 to the age of about 20, I transitioned out of my Christian theism and became an atheist. And I went through my angry atheist phase like many do and got over it eventually. And here I am today, a Magic Skeptic, having this conversation with you fine gentlemen. So that, again, that's a very, very short, abridged version, but that's roughly speaking how I eventually became the atheist, skeptic, methodological naturalist, nihilist arsehole that I am today.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think, and Callum can agree with me, having known me a long time, it was a long time coming for me. Because I was indoctrinated into the church as a very young child, about 7-ish, when my dad was terminally ill. I went to a C of E primary school, and we had a new vicar come into the local parish, and he was introducing the church. And the school basically told him about me, and he come and visited my house. They gave him my address and everything, just he come and visited my house, invited me to church, and yeah, sort of the rest was history. I was so heavily indoctrinated, I even worked for the church for a period of around 5 years. I went to Bible school, I did all sorts of stuff.
You used to ring the bells for them as well, didn't you?
Yeah, but actually a lot of that continued after I stopped having involvement with the church in general.
Okay.
Yeah. You'll actually find that 90% of campanologists are actually atheists, which is pretty hilarious to think about.
There's a lot of atheism in the Church of England.
Yeah, for sure.
It's the oldest joke that the local parish priest is an atheist, isn't it? It's become something of a stereotype.
Yeah. But I consistently, being someone who from a young age was very humanist, I consistently found things I disagreed with the church on. I became more liberal. I would actively, even because I was a youth worker for the church, and even in that, I reached a point where, while the rest of the leaders would read a Bible story and say, this is the truth, this is what happened, this is, I would sit there and say, well, no, this is what I believe, that doesn't mean you have to believe it. I became firmly against indoctrination before I was even an atheist. And yeah, sort of over time, as I became more liberal, I think I hit an existential crisis, probably 1920. You were talking about the angry atheist phase. I almost had that before I became fully convinced of atheism.
Yeah.
You're talking probably, about 2 years back I became atheist?
It's really recent, to be fair. Isn't
it is a very.
I remember I think we were walking through Gloucester at some stage, and you just went, "Oh, by the way, I'm an atheist now."
Yeah. Literally, yeah. Because it was just, it was one of those things where I was slowly coming around to it, and then the one day I was just sat at home, and the thought just occurred, and I was just like, "Yeah, that's just bollocks, isn't it?"
I don't believe this anymore.
Yeah.
It's simultaneously liberating and anger-inducing in equal measure, isn't it?
Yeah, for certain. Yeah. Realizing a lot of the harm that the church actually did to me more than anything else.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back to the show I was saying about I remembered my point while you were talking is that they're very bitchy, which, I mean, to be honest, my experience of the church is very similar. They're all very bitchy, and you've got mega churches competing, and they'll make threats against each other using Bible quotes. But, like, there's this one scene that just makes me laugh where...
Eye for an eye, motherfucker.
Yeah, because the one mega church is run by a family, and all the pastors are members of the family and stuff like that. And the wife of the bishop, the head of the church... turns, it's a black church, and she turns to one of her sons and she goes, and she rattles off powerful phrases, about 3 quotes, and then walks away. And I turned to my mum and I said, so she's just going to paraphrase those 3 different quotes and pretend there's a message in there?
I'm just noticing, by the way, that Callum has basically turned into a ghost.
Yes, I have to get the
yeah.
now,
yeah. The sun is right on me.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought I was white, but...
Yeah, no, it's too dark. Look alike. Yeah.
Those lights are going to take like 10 minutes to warm up.
Oh, Christ.
It's
okay, well, the show will go on.
Yep. I can see it clearly. It's no biggie.
Okay, all right then.
As long as we're visible, it's all right.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, my turn.
Yeah, it's your turn, yeah.
Right, okay, so... primary school, we were just it wasn't a particularly religious school, but it was just all the hymns and everything. I was a very stupid child, Shut up.
Didn't even have to say
it. All the hymns in like religious class and everything, it was just sort of taught as this is the done thing, and there wasn't a lot of science classes.
Yeah.
I remember science classes at school just being like how electricity works and things like that. And well, actually, that was it.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah, mine was very similar.
Yeah, did you have to do the circuit? You had
with the little clips.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, science wasn't very sciencey.
No, that was it. So I never really questioned it. And as I got older and things started happening in my personal life, I eventually just turned around at maybe, wasn't long after I started working, so we'll say 17. I just turned around and went, there's no fucking way there's a God.
Yeah.
No way. Yeah. And then I think, so that's when I started really questioning it, but I'm going to float your boat a little bit here. So when I discovered your channel, I went, yeah, okay, it's not.
Oh,
and
that's very kind of you.
Accepted it, yeah.
That's very kind of you to say. So are you saying my channel had an influence in kind of solidifying your atheism?
It tipped me over the edge, I would say, yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. Would you believe I've had more emails and DMs and private messages now at this point than I can actually recall, and it just fucking blows me away. I would have been humbled if only one person in the whole history of my channel reached out and said, yeah, you've given me a lot to think about. I'd have been delighted with that. But it turns out that I've had an influence on a significant number of people at this stage. And I don't say this to wax lyrical or to blow my own trumpet or something. I say it because I'm completely floored by it. I'm perplexed by it because, like, I feel like, and maybe this is a bit of imposter syndrome that's showing through. I feel like I'm not saying anything terribly original, and I know I'm not. I'm very much standing on the shoulders of giants. I read philosophy. I watch a lot of philosophy content. I digest what I hear, and I research videos to try and give the best possible argument I can. And I just assemble it all together in a package. But there's nothing terribly original about what I'm doing. And so the fact that anybody finds any profundity or utility in it at all just blows me away. And it's just very touching to hear that. And so I really do appreciate you saying that, Callum. It means a lot. But truth be told, it's bewildering to me. But yeah, it's I suppose one positive lesson I've drawn from it, one thing I've come to realize, is that there actually is a place for channels like mine. Because, you know, sometimes I receive this criticism. People would say something like, you know, you don't believe in God, get over it. Why do you have to talk about it all the time?
Well, you can flip that and say you believe in God. Why do you talk about it all the time?
Yeah.
In their defense, I think I know what they mean. There's a difference between believing in something and not believing in something. It kind of reminds me of the Neil deGrasse Tyson argument, which I made a video about, where, like, there isn't a meeting where non-golfers show up, right? There's no non-golfers meeting. So that's where the theist is coming from. It makes sense for people who care about the Bible to meet up and talk about the Bible. But from their perspective, it makes no sense for people who don't believe in God to meet up and talk about their shared non-belief in God. But in response to both the Tyson and the Christian there, I've made this point before, and again, this is not original to me either. The difference is there's no golfers club where golfers are trying to enact laws that harm or discriminate against non-golfers. There's no golfers club where golfers are forcing women to live in cloth bags. There's no golfers club that has power and is ascendant in governments around the world and is discriminating against members of the LGBTQ plus community or discriminating against women. There's no golfers club in the world where children are being indoctrinated into believing pseudo-scientific, evidentially bankrupt garbage. If there was such a golfers club, I would join the non-golfers club. Suddenly, self-identifying as a non-golfer would become exceedingly important.
Yeah.
That's why the atheist club exists. That's why my channel exists. That's why we're sat here as three atheists having this conversation, because pushing back against religious hegemony, pushing back against religious theocracy, indoctrination, religious pseudoscientific garbage that leads people to die because they pray rather than go to the fucking hospital, pushing back against evidentially bankrupt nonsense that's harming people in the world is an important thing to do. That's why the so-called non-golfers or atheist club exists. And that's the thing that the Christian doesn't realize. That's the thing that Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I love Neil deGrasse Tyson, but he was just so wrong on this particular point.
Yeah.
There is a space for channels like mine. And so long as people like you, Callum, are going to continue reaching out and telling me, you know what, Magic Skeptic, you help me. Well, that's music to my ears, and it gives me the fuel to keep going. It gives me the energy to keep putting out videos. It gives me the kind of, it puts a kind of what's the word? There's like a jump to my step. I can't remember the exact phrase.
Spring in your step.
Spring in my step. Thank you. It's that kind of feedback that makes me feel like, you know what, what I'm doing is important, and I'm not doing it to blow my own trumpet. I know my channel is still very small in the grand scheme of things, but there's a place for small channels like mine, and be damned. Maybe I will be. I'm going to keep doing it so long as it's having a positive effect, and so long as people are getting something out of it. If everybody just gave me a unanimous thumbs down and said, "Boo, we're not interested," well, then I wouldn't still be doing it, would I?
Yeah, well,
there's clearly an audience.
There are so few spaces online comparatively to religious spaces online where you talk about all the Islamic and Christian and Hindu religious spaces that exist online for religious people to come together and have discussions about that. There are so few places online where atheists can come together, and discuss their beliefs, their opinions, their thoughts. I think your channel's one of those places where atheists can come together, and you make a comment and you have a discussion with someone. It's particularly on the Patreon where you make a comment and there'll be 5 of us in the comments having a discussion about a point that's been made in a video, and those spaces don't exist very much for atheists, particularly because I feel like atheists are quite often pushed out by the religious majority. Not that our country is a religious majority, but if we look at the world as a whole, being that most of the world has access to the internet, the religious majority, the majority of the world is religious. We are being pushed out in that sense.
I will give a shout out to the charity that I did the live stream for recently, Recovering from Religion. If anybody watching this video is suffering in silence, and perhaps they're in a conservative religious community which makes it dangerous to actually voice their atheism, in which case I would encourage your silence. I've seen some atheists make some very dangerous comments where, you should announce your atheism, be proud, come out of the closet. Well, that's actually to risk your own life, depending on what part of the world you're in. So let's pretend that, every part of the world is so liberal as to accept the atheist coming out of the closet. That's not the case. But even if you're not in that part of the world, you might just be in a very conservative religious family who might ostracize you for coming out of the closet as an atheist. So all I want to do is put on people's radar. Perhaps you guys might be so kind as to put this in the description of the video.
Yeah.
Recovering, just put the website link for Recovering from Religion, which is an incredible organization that has a call center. You can call and get through to trained agents who will speak to you about your religious trauma. And they've got resources, articles, and videos that will help you. They've even got something which I think is absolutely amazing. It's called the Secular Therapy Project, where they will put you in touch with vetted secular therapists in your locale so that you can receive counseling and therapy from trained professionals without recourse to religious doctrine. And I think that's so important, because far too often when atheists are struggling with religious trauma, they'll go to a counselor, and the counselor ends up being a religious pundit of some description, and they'll recommend prayer or biblical reading or something like that. And that's just such a tragedy, that they're looking for help to escape fate, and they just end up back where they started. And just bear in mind, the Recovering from Religion Foundation offers help to people whether they're still a Christian or not. the goal of recovering from religion isn't to deconvert you and make you an atheist. The goal is to just help you with your religious trauma, and you can be helped with that religious trauma whether or not you plan on leaving your faith. So there's no expectation for you to deconvert and to become a filthy, sinful atheist. All they do is offer secular help to people who need it, people who are suffering from religious trauma. And I couldn't sing that charity's praises more highly. They are a charitable organization. They function entirely on donations. They don't get any government assistance or anything like that. So even if you're not suffering from religious trauma, if you'll permit me to just do a quick promotional bit here, guys, even if you're not suffering from religious trauma, it would be worth its weight in gold if you were to donate, even a quid, a euro, a dollar, a pound, whatever, just anything at all. If you're not yourself suffering, every donation counts. And so that's just, I don't get any kickback rather from that. I'm just bringing it up because I know that there might very well be people watching who will derive benefit from it or who may wish to support it. And so I think that's worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, I mean, I think speaking from similar experiences me and you have shared, that's a message I would very much like to promote, because there is a lot of trauma in coming out of religion.
Absolutely.
And just being in religion in and of itself, there can be a lot of trauma.
Yeah, I think some people in the UK have a bit of a blind spot about this. Yeah, I was just saying, I think some people in the UK have a bit of a blind spot about this because let's face it, the UK, for the most part, there are exceptions, but for the most part, at least where Christianity is concerned, the UK is nowhere near as fundamentalist as certain parts of the United States, for example, or certain parts of Africa or what have you. And so people in the UK can be kind of like, what do you mean religious trauma? You mean you don't believe in God anymore? Get over yourself, they might think. But you see, they're not considering the examples that you can read about at the touch of a button on Google, the people who have been ostracized by their family, the people who get disfellowshipped from their religious community and they never see their loved ones again, or they aren't given job opportunities because it becomes known that, oh, they're an atheist, don't give them a job because atheists are filthy, sinning beasts, right? Some of these communities in the States and other parts of the world are positively medieval when it comes to atheism and their attitudes to atheism, so much so that atheists can even be, lynched, attacked, or worse still, killed. And so, just to contextualize that, because some listeners might be a bit kind of flummoxed by this idea that atheists are such a stigmatized minority. Well, it depends on what part of the world you're in, of course.
Yeah. I think because there's certain things I'm going to have to give credit to the House of Commons for, but also I'm just going to have to put the credit out there that society has developed to a point where these problems can't be ignored. But the fact that we have anti-religious discrimination laws and the fact that we now allow gay marriage since 2014, 2015, is that? Or is it? Yeah, be about
give
that.
Or take.
Yeah, because what a lot of people don't realise is that the most powerful thing in this entire country is the Church of England, and one of the most powerful people in this country is the Archbishop of Canterbury, the head of the Church of England. He essentially holds 90% of the power over the country.
All we need to do now is get rid of the seats that are reserved for bishops in the House of Lords and the divine right of kings and all of that utter nonsense.
Yeah.
The royalists who are watching this aren't going to be very happy with what I just said, but what the fuck did you expect from a skeptic atheist? You think I'm just going to... And an Irishman, I might add. With the history our countries share and how the monarchy has treated Ireland in the past. Give me a fucking break.
Yeah, no,
I'm not a big fan of monarchy or divine rights of kings or the idea I am the king's subject.
Even a royalist can't ignore the fact that the divine right of kings isn't an argument anymore, because our current royal family are not the original royal family. So the divine right is gone.
And how can you be against the LGBTQ community? We all like a Tuesday.
Do you know what? Let's not explain that joke. Let's just leave that so that the people who know it will appreciate it, and those who are in the dark, well,
you're in the dark.
You're in the dark. Sorry, but Tuesdays are very, very special.
A sacred day.
A sacred day. A day of giving and a day of taking. That's funny, man. That's very, very funny.
It is. We can't have silence. Keep it going.
But perhaps that's one thing that Christians and us share. I mean,
what, a divine day?
No, they do like a Tuesday.
Oh, yeah.
I heard the millions of the clergy in the Catholic Church have been partaking of said behaviour for quite a long time, with impunity, I might add.
Yeah.
But, we won't talk about that for sake of preserving your channel. Did you have anything else you wanted to discuss?
That's a good question.
That is a good question. Like I said, we didn't really have a plan.
That's fair.
Yeah. No. Everyone's happy and healthy. Everyone's.
Were you watching Coronations? Were you watching Coronation Street the other night?
Nope.
Oh God, no. Oh.
Yeah. No, everybody's happy and healthy, thankfully. I'm very happy to report.
Good.
Excellent.
Good.
Well, I think we've probably reached the end of the discussion. We've been going, gosh, we're going an hour and a half.
Oh, fucking hell.
Yeah, time flies when you're having fun, eh?
Yeah,
it does, doesn't it?
Thank you very much for your time, Dara.
Thanks for coming on, Dara. It's been
No, my pleasure. My pleasure. Let's hope the audio worked out this time.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, you're soon here.
You know what? If the audio doesn't work out this time, I'm going to come to the conclusion that there is a God and that he just doesn't want us to have this conversation because it's going to deconvert too many people.
Yeah, that sounds like a great conclusion.
Yeah, so next week, if there's no audio on this, next week I'm going to change the name of my channel to The Magic Theist. And I will cite this video as evidence, and you will be responsible for my conversion.
Well, that would be a cold day in hell.
That would be a day in hell.
Yeah. Well, guys, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate you having me on, and it's been a great conversation.
It's gotten pleasure is all ours. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
it's gotten very deep in places, and I just hope that your listeners get something out of it. And it's been a joy.
Obviously,
I really, really appreciate you.
I can't imagine the size of our channel. There's nobody that hasn't heard of you, but we'll link you anyway.
Yes,
please do. Please. And by the way, let me know whenever you post it, because I'll share it on my community page as well, and hopefully a few of my subscribers will make the leap across and watch.
Oh, thank you very much. You don't have to do that, but thank you.
No, Jesus, that's the least I could do. Christ, that's no problem at all. Yeah, just let me know whatever day it goes live, and I'll just pop the link in my community tab, and hopefully my subscribers will make the leap and have a gander, as they say.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank
you very much.
Well, it's been nice talking to you, Dara. Alright, well, that was our episode, guys, interviewing Magic Skeptic.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
Yeah, more just having a conversation, but I mean,
thank you very much again, Dara.
Massive thank you.
We're just a bit starstruck.
You guys would have missed it, but we celebrated really hard at the end of that. That was
because our audio worked.
Yes. Thank you so much for coming on, Dara. If you haven't already, guys, it will be linked below. The Magic Skeptic's channel. He's amazing. He does fantastic critiques and breakdowns of various arguments. In fact, it's interesting. He mentioned KB because
Caneby,
yeah, because that episode he did on moral realism. That sent me down the rabbit hole of reading Sam Harris's Moral Landscape, which was a hell of a rabbit hole to go down, because I started reading the book thinking, I'll just read it, and then I ended up making 5 pages of notes. But thank you for watching, guys. We really do appreciate it. If you did like the video, do consider leaving it a like and subscribing for more. if you are interested in seeing any of the climbing content we do, link will be down below to Callum's channel. And
hiking now. We've done a couple
and
of
hiking, and hiking, We have got to do some more hikes soon, especially with the weather being like it is.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
We didn't mention it in the show, but fucking hell is it hot in here.
Yeah, it is.
Oh my god.
I mean, attic space, so yeah. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and we will see you in the next one.
Thank you very much, guys. Take it easy.